Hello and welcome to God and Country. This is our episode 2. I hope that you enjoyed last week's episode. And here I am in studio with Reed Cooley. Mr. Reed, sir, how are you?
I'm great, Dan. How about you?
Man, I'm doing wonderful. Easter Sunday is by far, whenever it comes to church, we all have different holidays that we enjoy. When it comes to church holidays, Easter's my favorite. I love Easter Sunday. We're celebrating the death, burial, and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And I just love it. Church was packed. Church was full, and we had people actually standing outside and had a huge meal after church. And it was just a good time, just celebrating, what Jesus did for each and every one of us. And it was just a good weekend. I do want to mention this though, but I did get a little fired up Saturday night whenever I saw that Joe Biden declared Easter Sunday Transgender Day.
Mm.
That is absolutely insane that the President of the United States would proclaim on Easter Sunday, March 31st, as Transgender Day, on the most holy holidays of the entire year, the most holiest of all days. And he's going to declare it transgender.
Mm.
What a shame.
Well, yeah, that's despicable. It's not surprising when you take into account the fact that the Biden administration is a satanic administration.
Yeah.
I have zero doubt about it. It wasn't just the Biden administration. Our good friend Colby Busby actually brought something to my attention that disturbed me just as much. So it was on Easter Sunday. Disney launched a marketing campaign, I kid you not, called Pride from Above. And there were ads popping up on different Facebook users' accounts. It was made to look like Easter. It was a certain application of the rainbow. And it was obvious what they were doing, as if co-opting the rainbow, a symbol from God, isn't insidious enough. They were attempting to reiterate that once again for the purpose of really just distorting Easter, right? Exactly what we talked about extensively last week, how the enemy cannot make, the enemy can only mock.
That's right. Yeah.
I think that what we're talking about here is it's not just the Biden administration. I really saw different aspects of the enemy, like that uppercase E enemy, as we were discussing last week doing that. You have Facebook, Disney, both in collusion on the same thing. It's not hyperbole to say that Easter, like you said, is the holiest of all of our holidays. And there's no surprise that the enemy would want to undermine it first and foremost.
Absolutely. There's 365 days in a year, and you're going to pick Easter Sunday and declare it Transgender Day. I'm with you. It is absolutely satanic, and it's just a spit in God's face. And then Joe Biden, on the other hand, wants to claim that he's a Christian, and all these other people want to claim that they're a Christian, whenever they are going to absolutely spit in the face of Jesus Christ on this day. I have friends who are atheists. I have friends who do not believe in God. I have friends who do not believe that Jesus was the Son of God and that Jesus went to the cross and he died and he rose again on the third day. I have a lot of friends that don't believe that. But they respect us Christians and what we believe. And because of their respect for us, they're willing to lay aside on that special day, the differences and even sometimes even join in a little bit and trying to encourage. But then Joe Biden wants to go to the completely opposite direction, and do a Transgender Day, which is it's despicable. It's unbelievable that he would do that and claim to be a Christian president. And unbelievable.
I don't think the man has a Christian bone in his body.
I agree.
First and foremost, how any Christian I wouldn't call it in good conscience, but how any Christian can sign off on the pro-choice agenda, how any Christian can be complicit in the mass extermination of babies, of innocent babies. That's absolutely unbelievable to me. So going back to the Biden administration, I think that they might be the most evil White House administration that we've ever had, right? You and I were having some riveting discussions on religious liberty in particular last week. You just said that whenever it comes to non-Christians, whether they're non-believers or they're believers of a different sort, whenever it comes to their holidays, for example, like my Muslim friends who want to celebrate Ramadan, they have the liberty to do that, and I respect that. But whenever they tell me that I don't have the same right to worship that they do, or that my religion my Christianity should somehow be disrespected. It should occupy a lower place in the social hierarchy. Then we have a serious problem. I was talking with another great friend of mine, a fellow Christian named Bradley, yesterday afternoon about how Christ does not want wimps. Like, God does not want wimps and doormats and pushovers, right? We're called to be defenders of the faith. And that doesn't mean pansying around things. That doesn't mean trying to modernize our faith or to make it stylish or anything. And this runs parallel with an observation that I've made in conservative politics. I've worked on so many campaigns and with so many organizations who make this fatal mistake of believing that whenever they go out and they speak the truth, whenever they're out there, spreading the message of liberty, or they're talking, harshly but truly about a specific policy or what's needed in a specific area, they think that when they tell the truth, they're going to be loved for some naive reason. They think that when they tell the truth, then voters are just going to flock to them and they're going to be loved. No, one of the many pieces of wisdom that I think can be extrapolated from the story of Christ, from the passion of Christ, is that if there's any response you can expect from people for telling the truth, it's not going to be love. It's going to be hatred. I mean, they put our Lord to death
Absolutely.
because he got out there and he spoke the truth. Christ obviously paved the way for us, and we have to be willing to carry the truth all the way to the grave if necessary.
You talk about Jesus, not being a wimp, and Jesus wanting men, to stand for truth and to stand for what, what we believe in. Think about this for a moment. We just celebrated Easter this past Sunday, but think about this. Most crucifixions, and there was no death more brutal than a Roman crucifixion.
Right.
That's why the Israelites, that's why the Jewish people wanted the Romans to crucify Jesus. The Jewish people back in the time, they didn't do crucifixions. That was a Roman thing.
Right.
The Jewish people they would hang you, they would stone you to death. I mean, they would do things like that, but not crucifixions. That is why they wanted to crucify Jesus, was because they hated him so much. And many times, whenever the Romans would do a crucifixion, before they crucified a man, they would scourge him.
Right.
And they would take those cat o' nine tails and they would beat him on his back or her back. And many times, history tells us that a lot of people would die right there. They would not even make it to the crucifixion. They would be dead long before, because those Roman soldiers, they were the elite of the elite that did the scourging and that did the crucifixion. I mean, you talk about men. I mean, these were, I mean, I call them a man's man.
Right.
I mean, would be like our special forces.
They didn't have purple wigs and they weren't questioning their gender.
Absolutely, they was not.
They're not
Absolutely.
soybean eaters. These were Roman soldiers.
Correct. Absolutely. And many times they would beat a man, especially with that cat o' nine tails, 39 times on his back or her back. Many times, whenever they would finish, they would die. They would die. They would take their arms and they would tie them on that whipping post, and they would stretch them out so that Roman soldier could just whip, that back. And many of them would die. But Jesus, he did not die on that whipping post. I mean, they did all that to Jesus. Then they blindfolded him and they punched him in the face and they mocked him. They did all of those things to him. But yet then he still took his cross. He still put that cross on his back and tried to carry it up that hill.
Dan, you're absolutely right. Whenever it comes to the Roman punishment of crucifixion, it is one of the most painful, one of the most brutal forms of execution ever devised in history. And it wasn't simply about the brutality when it comes to crucifixion. It was also about the humiliation, the isolation, right? So it wasn't just the goal of making Christ suffer, right? That wasn't, the people who were calling for Christ to be crucified, they weren't simply trying to inflict massive amounts of pain on him, although they most certainly did. They were trying to humiliate him, to isolate him, to relegate him to the corners of society and really make an example out of him, right? So, yeah, thank you for that.
Yeah, and to my humiliation, that's why they stripped him naked before the world. I mean, his own mother was standing there at the foot of the cross. And even in that moment, Christ, looked at his mother and and said to his mother, "Behold thy son." And then he said to his brother, which that was his brother, his half-brother, and he said to his brother, "Behold thy mother." What he was doing was Jesus, I don't know where Joseph was at during that time. A lot of people believe that Joseph had already passed.
Right. That's what I've heard as well.
Joseph would have probably, been between 55 and 60 years old. So Joseph would have probably been, he'd have probably passed at that time. But Jesus, it was his responsibility to take care of his mom. He was the firstborn son, but he was letting his brother know, hey, look, mom is your responsibility now. So even Jesus on the cross, taking the responsibility of a man, taking care of his family. And I mean, it just speaks to, obviously, he was God manifest in the flesh, but I mean, just speaks to the man part of Jesus, to where he was taking care of his responsibility. And the whole Easter weekend, to me, is just a celebration of what Jesus did for us on the cross, but also who he was while he was here on this earth. And just whenever you just think about that, and then when Joe Biden wants to do this transgender garbage, it is a spit in the face of Christ. That is why I push as hard as I push for Christians to engage in the political arena. And that is what God and Country is all about. It's about you and I as Christians engaging in this political arena. We need you to engage. We need every Christian in America, every single Christian, every man, every woman, every teenager, every young adult. We need to get our children engaged and get our children involved, because it is necessary. It is necessary for our nation that every Christian is engaged. I hear so many times, Reed, Christians, well, I don't have time. Well, make time. We're losing our country. We are losing our nation. I had somebody tell me, we just had a vote not too long ago. And back a few weeks ago, we had our Republican primary in Mississippi. And I had people tell me that they did not have time to go vote. And how can you, when we want to say we love our country, we love our nation, and we want to say that, we have the greatest nation in the world, and I believe we do. I believe that without a shadow of a doubt that we have the greatest nation in the world. We have been blessed. But it is because of Christians being engaged in the political arena. We need every Christian to be engaged. You have to make time. You make time for things you think are important. And if you really think elections are important, well, you and I as Christians will make time to get out and vote. And that is why we have to reelect President Trump. I mean, it's imperative, it's important that we reelect him come November. And so, but in order to do that, it's going to take every Christian getting out and voting, every Christian, 100%. Right.
And yet you and I have talked about a couple of issue areas where maybe we don't necessarily agree with some things Trump did, but I've long been of the impression the only way this country stands a chance is if we reelect Donald Trump.
That's right.
To the White House this year. I'm firmly in that camp, have been for a long time. And something else you and I discussed extensively last week is how the family is really a microcosm, is really a reflection of the nation of the whole. And you and I talked about the different ways, especially through this transgender ideology, how the family is under attack, how it's under a direct assault by the Biden administration, by the left, by the uppercase E enemy. But whenever we broaden that out to the nation, understanding that the family is the building block of the nation and that it's ultimately a reflection of the nation, I see a nation that's under attack in many of the exact same ways, most especially with our border, most especially with this immigration crisis that is being manufactured by the Biden administration, by foreign interests, all simultaneously. So we see the family being invaded. We see the family being subverted. We see the identity of the family being completely and totally upended. I see all of those things happening with the nation as well. We have our nation quite literally being invaded. We have our nation being subverted. We have the identity of our nation being changed through the replacement of one demographic with other demographics that are more likely to vote in favor of certain political parties, certain political agendas over others. So whenever we talk about the Biden administration, I think that this is one of the very few instances in history where it's very clear who the heroes are and who the villains are. This is a very real and clear fight of good versus evil. And when we study history, it's not always so evident. You most of the time, almost all of the time, you have areas of historical nuance, right? There's good and evil on both sides. But I think, what we have here, in the year 2024, we have a very real and obvious conflict, a contest of good versus evil. And I explained that, a key part of my personal theology last week is that we are put on earth for the purpose of fighting evil, right? We are not put here to hole ourselves in monasteries and to cower away from the troubles of the world. We are here to get out there and actively confront and defeat evil and fight it and do so to the death, do so in the face of suffering, in the midst of suffering, just as our Lord did.
whenever you see pictures from the border, and we're going to talk about that extensively about the border, about a biblical perspective of a border wall is what I really want to dive into today and talk a little bit about. Because I hear people say, "Well, you're a Christian, aren't you for just letting people come to America because they can get so much help here?" Then you go look at pictures, right, of the border. You know what I see? I see a lot of young male
Military age men.
military age men is what I see coming across, coming into our country. We don't even know who these people are. They're not being vetted. I mean, they're just coming in, and they're coming in by not by the hundreds. They're coming in by the thousands. You have a bunch of 20, 21, 22-year-olds coming into our country. We don't know who they are. Most of the time, we don't even know where they're from. And it is insane to think that you're going to let a bunch of young military-age men
Right.
into our country and there not be a major problem. I mean, there's
Absolutely.
absolutely going to be a major problem. And so somebody said, "So you're a Christian. Are you for a wall?" Absolutely, I'm for a wall. I mean, absolutely. Now, let me just make something clear. I am not against immigration, right?
Right.
I'm not against immigration. I am not saying that we should not let anyone come into our country. What I am saying is this, that I am 100% opposed to illegal immigration. I'm opposed to that. Here, we're sitting, at my house, right now, and I have walls around my entire house, and I have doors, and they have locks on them. I have windows, and they have locks on them. And somebody comes up and they want to come in to my house, they can knock on my door, and I can choose whether or not to let them in.
I don't know, Dan. That sounds awfully racist. You might need to be careful. All this talk about walls around your house and protecting your family and all
That's
that
right.
kind of thing.
Well, I mean, you have to do that. I remember one time several years ago, I lived over there on Robin Oaks Drive in Gulfport. My wife and I, we hadn't been married long, and I had this beautiful gun safe in my bedroom. And I may or may not have any more guns. I might have lost all of them. I'm not sure.
And a tragic boating accident, right? Yeah.
Absolutely, in a tragic boating accident. But I had this beautiful safe, right, in my bedroom, and I had maybe one or two, potentially maybe 3 guns in there, maybe a BB gun, and maybe 2 or 3 BB guns, the pump action BB guns in that little safe. But I came home from church, and this was near Christmas time. I came home from church on a Sunday afternoon, and someone had busted through my front door. I mean, they didn't just open the door and walk in. I mean, they took a sledgehammer, looked like it, they beat my front door in,
Wow.
and all the trim was knocked off of my door onto the front porch. They stole all of the Christmas presents that we had, and then they took my gun safe. They took the whole thing. They couldn't get into it, but they took the whole thing with them. It was more than one person because it was
Wow.
a big safe, and so they just took the whole thing with them. And I came home and I saw my family cried. My little girl, we called the police. The police came, did a police report, and of course we didn't get anything back, and they never found the people that stole my guns. But my point is that I said all that to say this: you can't just let anybody come into your house. You do have to put mechanisms in place to keep people from coming in, and we did. But somebody came in illegally. They busted through my front door, and so I understand that we're not going to be able to stop everybody from coming into our country. But we dead sure better be doing as much as we possibly can to stop everybody from coming into our country that's not vetted and that's not coming in legally. It is important. We cannot keep just letting a bunch of young military, and I will say this probably over and over
Yep.
again, we cannot just keep letting a bunch of young military guys coming in. They could potentially be terrorists. They could potentially be coming in to try to do harm. We hear it every day. There was just a story just in the last couple of weeks where a young lady was killed because of an illegal immigrant who was arrested, and then they let him just back out on the street. We hear stories like that all the time where someone is murdered, someone is killed. And if our president would just do his job and protect America at our southern border, a lot of this stuff wouldn't be happening. Think about the drugs that come into our country. All of this drugs are just pouring in across the border.
Mhm.
And it's all because our president won't do his job. He is trying to tie the hands of our border patrol. Texas is having to send the National Guard, their National Guard down to the border to protect Texas, and I believe that they have every right to do so. You have Christine Olm up in South Dakota. She's sending people down. A lot of other states Republican states are sending people to try to help, because we have to stop people from coming into our country illegally. We have to put a stop to it. There's so many things that will happen if we don't. And people ask, well, how can you be a Christian and you don't want nobody to come to America? Well, first off, it's not that I don't want anybody to come to America. I want people to come to America legally. I want you to come in legally.
Right.
Just like I want you to come to my house, I want you to come in legally. Yeah, I don't want you to break into my house. I don't want you to kick my windows out of my house and bust my door down and come in and steal everything. I want you to come in legally. I have nothing against immigration. I think it's a wonderful thing. I've got a good friend. He came into America and he went through all the legal channels. He got a citizenship. And I remember several years, matter of fact, it was 2016. It was the first time that he was able to vote. He was so proud. I went with him down to the Lyman Community Center where we voted. And he was so proud to go in and to vote and cast his vote. And he put that little sticker on, where it said, I voted. And he was so proud because he did everything legally. And then people come in illegally. And then we want to give them free health care.
Right. Yeah, absolutely insane.
It's insane. We have veterans. We have military veterans.
Homeless and on the street, right?
Homeless, on the street.
Shelling out government benefits for illegal immigrants, people who violated our laws the moment
Correct.
they stepped foot in this country. It could not be more backwards.
It's unbelievable.
Right. And so whenever we think about the issue of immigration, obviously this is an issue that is at the DNA of America, right? Because as commonly as it's said, as much of a platitude as it sounds, we are, a country of immigrants. But we have to understand that this is not a situation where 5,000 people a day are simply coming to America seeking better opportunity.
No.
The situation that we are in right now is that immigration is actually being used as a weapon against the American people. So you don't have to be very much of a geography expert to understand that a person cannot walk from countries like Pakistan, from India, from Bangladesh, from countries across the Middle East and Sub-Saharan Africa to the U.S.-Mexico border.
Correct.
There are tremendous amounts of resources from someone going into flying those people into Mexico and into parts of Latin America, shipping those people in. And you mean to tell me that the White House isn't at least somewhat aware of what's going on here? I'll tell you what I think is really happening. I think that, a lot of things are happening at once. Sure, they want to pack the vote and give migrants the ability to vote in this upcoming election. I do think that they want to overwhelm, the American vote with mass numbers of migrants. But I think it's an even longer game than that, and we need to recognize that now. So the next census is in 2030. What a lot of people don't know is that whenever the census is taken in every state, there is no distinction made between illegal immigrant and a U.S. citizen. It goes by the number of heads in that state. It does not go by the number of legal citizens. That's not something that a lot of Americans know. What I think is being done here is that while the Democrats are in the White House, they are importing as many future Democratic voters as they can. They're going to flood blue states like California and New York with them, so that whenever the time for the next census comes around, those states will have a disproportionate amount of power in the U.S. House of Representatives. So to put it this way, if California can import another 10 to 15 million migrants into its country by between now and 2030, all those heads will be counted in the next census. That could mean that California gets several more seats in the House of Representatives.
12 to 15.
Red states will not stand a chance.
That's right.
We'll be completely and totally and helplessly outnumbered at that point. That'll have an effect in the Electoral College. It will completely and totally upend our ability to use our own government in order to represent us. It will be a government even less representative of us than the government that we have today.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's a great point. And I think that's exactly what they're trying to do, because one thing that the Democrats are good at, right? They're good at a couple of things. So one thing they're good at is they're good at playing the long game.
Yeah.
And so they will come in, and if something doesn't work, they'll just keep at it. And they're slowly chipping away at our freedoms. They're slowly chipping away, gun. They always talk about gun control, right? And they're slowly chipping away at our guns, and they want to take our guns away from us. And so now they're slowly bringing in, like you just said, if you bring in 10 to 12 million, people to California, that would be 12 to 15 new people that's representing those people in Washington, D.C. And you're absolutely right. they're not going to send a bunch of Republicans. They're going to send more Democrats.
Right.
So, what does the Bible have to say? Is it, according to the Bible, should we or should we not build a wall? Well, there's a whole book in the Bible about this very topic, and it's Nehemiah. Whenever Nehemiah was brought into captivity, I want to read a couple verses, from the Bible, because in Nehemiah 1, Nehemiah was brought into captivity. And the Bible tells us that whenever he was a cupbearer for the king of Persia, and they had went in and they had demolished and tore down the walls of Jerusalem and burned the walls with fire, and they just totally destroyed the Jerusalem, and they left it in total destruction. And so one day Nehemiah coming to the king, and Nehemiah heard about these things, and the Bible says in Nehemiah 1:4, and it came to pass when I heard these words, talking about he heard about the walls being torn down, he heard about the walls being burned with fire. And Nehemiah said, and it came to pass when I heard these words that I sat down and wept and mourned certain days and fasted and prayed before the God of heaven. And so what's happening here, Nehemiah hears about the walls being burned with fire. He hears about the walls being completely destroyed. He hears that his home, Jerusalem, is lying in waste and just been completely and utterly destroyed. And the Bible tells us that Nehemiah wept. Well, Nehemiah was the king's cupbearer. And the story is Nehemiah goes in to talk to the king, and the king notices that Nehemiah is down. He notices that Nehemiah, his countenance is not good. And so the king begins to talk to Nehemiah. And Nehemiah tells the king, he says, I'm this way because I just found out that my home has been burned with fire and that the walls have been torn down and my country is laying in waste. What's amazing about this story is that this king, gives Nehemiah the things that he needs to go back home to rebuild the walls. Yeah, let me read you this verse in Nehemiah 2. Nehemiah 2, verse number 18. Then I told them of the hand of my God which was good upon me, as also the king's words that he had spoken unto me. And they said, let us rise up and build. So they strengthened their hands for this good work. And so the Bible even calls it a good work. What was the good work? Building those walls. Why? They were building those walls for safety, to protect. Now, did the enemy come in and did the enemy overthrow Jerusalem? And did the enemies burn down the walls? Yes, it happened. Countries do get overthrown. But those walls were very, very important. And Nehemiah knew that if they was going to rebuild their homes, the first thing that had to be rebuilt was those walls, because those walls are going to be for protection. Those walls were going to keep the enemy out, keep the enemy away. Now, unfortunately, the enemy came in and they did overtake Jerusalem. And that's another whole story. The reason why, because they were letting people in that they should have never let people in. They was letting people in without being vetted. And that's exactly what's happening here to America. And listen, look, this is probably going to tick off a few people, but that's fine. But there's no way that we are to have Muslims representing us in Washington, D.C. That is not even, I can't even comprehend that.
Delivering victory speeches in Arabic. It's utterly insane.
It's unbelievable. And that's another thing. If you're going to come to America, at least learn English. Learn English. And so I think that's very important. If I was going to move and go to a country that their language wasn't English, I would learn their language.
I would learn their language.
If I was going to go to Mexico, I would learn Spanish. If I was going to go if I was going to go to Russia, I would learn Russian.
Here's a question for you, Dan. What language are our laws written in?
Absolutely.
Yeah? Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Right.
Absolutely.
Our laws are not written in Spanish. Our Constitution, Articles of Confederation before that. I'm sorry, but they were English, in case anyone needs a brief history lesson there. Thank you for bringing up the book of Nehemiah. Something else that I was contemplating as I was, just getting ready for today's show are the 2 centuries of history immediately before Christ's birth, right?
Yeah.
So whenever we look at the years 167 to 116 BC, so this is just under 200 years after Alexander the Great. Alexander the Great is one of those names in history that people tend to recognize more than others. So when Alexander the Great died, he infamously left his kingdom broken into his new empire, the Macedonian Empire, split into 4 smaller empires. One of those empires was called the Seleucid Empire, and it conquered the region of Judea, as well as many of the other, many other parts of what is now the Middle East. So whenever this culturally Greek empire, ruled this area, this was a very intense time for Jews, for their national identity, for preserving themselves. So we look at this period of history. This is well after Alexander the Great, and this is in the empire that he left behind. This is under the reign of an emperor named Antiochus IV. So we actually saw that Jerusalem, its temples had been desecrated. During this period, the Jewish people were actually required to sacrifice at the altar of Greek pagan false gods. We saw that Israel's youth, they were being slaughtered. It was a very tense and horrible time for the Jewish people living inside of a Greek empire that was shoving its culture down their throats, absolutely trying to undermine their way of life. So there was a resistance movement that actually spawned during this period. So we're talking about 167 to 160 BC. Not a whole lot of people really understand this history, but the Jews successfully overthrew the Seleucid Empire after several years of battle against this Greek empire, so that they could worship their gods again. This is actually the historical basis for the holiday of Hanukkah. So the holiday of Hanukkah, that goes back to the 2nd century BC, whenever the Jews ran the Macedonians out of Judea, including the city of Jerusalem, which you just described there from the book of Nehemiah. So get this. Whenever the Jews win this revolt, they defeat the Seleucid Empire, that was the beginning of the rule of the Hasmonean dynasty. That was the dynasty that ruled Judea until Herod the Great, the
Wow.
father of the King Herod from the Nativity story. So whenever we look at the Nativity and the birth of our Lord, the entrance of our Lord into this world, it was a world in which the Jews had just recently recaptured their identity. They had just retaken their city, staked their claim in their city, really asserted their identity as Jewish people, right? That was the world into which Christ came. And I often think about, those historical events because of their significance, to the issue that we're facing today. The incursions of a foreign government, the rule of a foreign government, forcing the Jewish people to worship, at the altars of false gods like Zeus and Aphrodite and so on and so forth, right? I see so much of that happening within our churches today. We see this foreign thread, this modernism, wokeism, all these other sorts of terms that we can apply to it. We see the rainbow flag being draped from the pulpit. We see Christianity having itself hollowed out and having its skin worn as a trophy by our enemy, uppercase E enemy, right? So whenever I think about, the revolts just 160 years before Christ that became the historical foundation of Hanukkah, I see so much value there in terms of what we as Christians can learn today.
Yeah, I agree. And whenever you go back to, the Nehemiah, where he went in and built the wall, in Nehemiah 4 and verse number 21, he says, or verse number 20, in what place thereof ye hear the sound of the trumpet, resort ye thither unto us, our God shall fight for us. So we labored in the work, and that work was building that wall to keep out, those people are going to try to come in and destroy their country. And like you talked about the children, the enemy today, they're fighting different. It's a different battle. They're coming in today. They're not going to come in here and try to kill, and they're not going to come into my home and slaughter my children. But what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to brainwash my children. They're going to try to implement these TV shows where they're tearing down the man in the home. They're going to implement things into some of these TV shows that's degrading, the home and the mom and the father and that institution that God put together. God put the home together. God created man. God created woman. God put them in the garden together. And then you look at the church. God started the church. And you look at government. God is the one that instituted those things. And so if you look at Satan, the enemy that is coming in, he's trying to destroy our government 100%. And I hate to say this, but he's doing a good job.
Right.
He's coming in.
Hard to argue.
Just look what's happening in Washington, D.C. Look what's happening in a lot of our capitals around the nation, where they're arguing, whether or not you can take a baby out of the womb and let the baby there on the table and
let it die or
let it
dismember it or do all these other horrific things
It's
to it.
unbelievable. And that's what's happening. The enemy is coming in and they're fighting different. They're fighting smarter. They're coming in. They're trying to overtake government. They're doing all that they can to destroy government. And then they're attacking the home. I mean, they're trying to say, so how do they attack the home? Well, it's okay to have two dads. Well, two dads cannot produce a home. I mean, two dads
can't even produce a kid.
They cannot produce a child. Two women, they cannot produce a child. It is not possible. It is not possible for a man, and we're not going to have a lesson today about birthing children, but I will say it is not possible for a man to get another man pregnant. It is not possible. It is not possible for a lady to get a lady. It's not possible, right? It's just not even. But the enemy comes in, and the enemy tries to say, "Well, it's all okay. It's all okay." And then not only are they destroying the home, but now they're going after the church, and Satan. He's doing a good job with our government. He's doing a good job with the home, and he's doing a good job with our church. I mean, you had churches this past Sunday that would not even use the word resurrection or crucifixion or the word Jesus or the word Lord in their advertisement for their Easter service because they didn't want to offend anybody. I mean, where are we at where there are preachers that don't want to use the word crucifixion or Jesus because they're scared that they're going to offend somebody? Well, I've got news for you. If you come to my church, there's a good chance you're going to get offended because I'm going to say Jesus. I'm going to say crucifixion. I'm going to say that a man should marry a woman. I'm going to say that there's only two genders. I'm going to say abortion is murder. I'm going to say keep that woke garbage out of our schools and quit trying to brainwash our children. I'm going to say those things, and if you don't like it, listen, there's 100,000 churches in the United States of America, and there's plenty of churches that you can attend that the pastor's going to walk around on eggshells. I'm not going to walk on eggshells. I'm not walking on eggshells with this show. I'm not walking on eggshells at my church. It's not happening. All I'm saying is we need Christians to engage, have a backbone, stand for truth. So what? Somebody's going to get mad at you. Yeah, you'll probably get a nasty email. Yeah, you'll probably get a nasty phone call. I get nasty people write things about my church. That I'm too political. And listen, there's nothing political about standing for life of the unborn. That's just the right thing to do. There's nothing political about standing against this woke garbage that's creeping into our schools and creeping into our nation. That's just a moral obligation as a Christian to stand up and say no. Listen, I don't care if you're a teacher. I'm going to tell you something that just absolutely just gets me fired up is whenever these men want to put on these skirts and put on these thongs and go into these libraries and try to read at our children. They want to paint themselves and put all this makeup on themselves and dress up, and go in and try to read, to our children. That's insane. You don't talk about a mental disorder. I mean, that is absolutely garbage. It's not happening on my watch. There's no way on this side of heaven. They'll be serving ice cream cones in hell before I let my children go sit in some library and let some dude get up wearing a thong panties with a skirt on, with makeup on, wearing his wife's bra or some bra that he bought at some store and read to my children. It ain't happening. And somebody needs to stand up and say, that's garbage and that's filth, and we're not letting it happen on our watch. That's what's wrong. He's about saying destroying our churches. He's going after our churches, and pastors don't want to say the truth because they're scared that somebody might not come to their church. Well, somebody's got to speak up.
Looks like you've been sleeping well.
Megan, he's back. The My Pillow guy.
And you're looking good.
Still feeling good.
Well, just when you thought it couldn't get any better, we've got the best pillow ever, My Pillow 2.0.
Wow, it's so soft and smooth.
It's cool to the touch. How did you do that?
Well, we took My Pillow's patented fill and combined it with this new technology that we didn't have back then when I invented My Pillow to bring you the best pillow in history, My Pillow 2.0. Just like all of you, I never imagined that My Pillow could get any better. That's why I haven't changed it in nearly 20 years. Then I heard about a revolutionary new technology, and I knew I had to bring it to you all. My Pillow 2.0 is truly the next generation of My Pillow.
The My Pillow 2.0 is cooler and softer than the last My Pillow. It is so comfortable to sleep on at night. I look forward to going to bed, and I wake up well rested in the morning.
Sleep is all about temperature and height. My Pillow 2.0's patented adjustable fill is going to give you the exact individual support you need from your head to your bed. And now here's where it gets even better. We've all experienced those temperature-related sleep interruptions where you get too hot, you toss and turn, you flip your pillow over to the cool side. Well, all that's gone with my brand new My Pillow 2.0 cooling fabric that's made with temperature-regulating thread.
The best sleep just got even better. Whether you have a MyPillow or not, you need to get the brand new MyPillow 2.0. Call or go to MyPillow.com now. Use your promo code, and for a limited time when you buy one, you'll get a second one absolutely free.
You're sleeping even better.
And cooler, too.
And you're looking good.
Feeling good.
I knew you would.
Visit mypillow.com.
Our country's on a fast track to hell, and people don't want to stand up and speak truth. It is important. Listen to me. Let me just stop and just say this right here. So many times Christians don't want to speak up because they think, well, we're in the minority. I've got news for you. We're not in the minority. There's a lot of people that believe, oh, yes, we'll have some people on Twitter that'll be running their mouth, some keyboard warriors, and they'll keep at it. It really helps our algorithm, so I love it whenever you comment. It's good for our show whenever you comment. And maybe some of you, some of this stuff might sink in, and you might wake up one morning, you know what, I think that preacher's right. Yeah, he seemed a little harsh, but yeah, it's a funny thing. We shouldn't let grown men, put on bras and panties and skirts and read to our children. That's insane. We shouldn't allow that to happen. We shouldn't be letting that happen in our schools or in our libraries. Maybe some of you will wake up and realize that shouldn't be happening. But we're not in the minority. We are in the majority. There's millions of Americans all over the United States of America that believe everything that I just said. They believe it just like I just said it. And so I just want to encourage you. Don't be nervous. Don't be scared. Stand for truth. Stand for what you believe in. And Reed, I don't know if you want to keep having shows with me or not. And but that's where I'm at, man. Somebody's got to stand up and say, you know what, enough's enough.
I just think we need to pass the offering plate right now because when we just had church,
enough's enough. I mean, it's unbelievable. It fires me up, and it's just. I had somebody tell me this, and I say this with every bit of humility that I could grasp, because somebody said to me, "Well, there's no way that you're going to be able to build a church, saying things like that." And maybe Sunday we won't have anybody at church. But man, the last several Sundays, we can't even get everybody in our building.
Wow.
We have, literally, it is packed.
Praise God.
And we're in a building program, and God's been good to us, and we're trying to build this extension so we can have more space, so we can have more Sunday school rooms, so we can have more bathrooms, so we can reach more people, so more people can hear this crazy guy get up and preach some of the things that I say, which is just truth. But I'm going to say this. You speak truth, preach truth, people will come. People want to hear truth. They want to hear truth. Right. And there's families out there that believe just like us. There's families out there that says, you know what? He's right. We should have the right to choose whether or not we're going to vaccine our children. He's right. We should have that right to decide, whether or not we're going to do these things. He's right. We shouldn't be bringing our little girls and our little boys and let some grown man shake their hiney in their face. That's nonsense and that's insane. We shouldn't allow that to happen. You know what? He's right. We shouldn't be letting our children go to a classroom where they're putting litter boxes because you got some girl that wants to act like she's a cat because she's having ideology issues. No, young lady, you're a little girl and you don't need to be using the litter box. Somebody's got to stand up and just speak truth. It's unbelievable where we're at in our country. Right. And I feel bad they even got to say some of this stuff.
Well, I mean, you shouldn't have to, but I am glad that we opened up this conversation talking about the crucifixion, because I think now is a great point to bring into that, is that, Easter is about the crucifixion, but at least as much it is about the resurrection, right? So,
absolutely.
Christ, obviously, he was put to death for speaking the truth, but he came back, right? He was resurrected. And it is, I don't know if I can say that there's, maybe the greatest thing about being a Christian, but among them is that, we know how all this is going to end. We get to flip to the back of the book and see that, we're going to win in the end, right? So whenever it comes to just being brave, as Pastor Dan was talking about here, don't be afraid, to stand up for God, to stand up, for the gospel, because we're going to win in the end. There's nothing to be afraid of.
That's right. I want to read another verse out of Nehemiah 6. Nehemiah 6 and verse number 15, it says, "So the wall was finished." They finished it. They started and they finished it. I want to give you just several quick things on why the wall is important. And let's talk about these few quick things. Number one, it's important because of national security. We talked about earlier, national security. We have to know who's coming into our country. I am for legal immigration, right? I'm for it, 100%. I'm for building a wall. But I do believe also in that wall, you should have a door. People should be allowed in. People come in the right way. They fill out the right paperwork. They're going to come here to America. What are you bringing to America? What are you bringing to our country? Listen, we don't want a bunch of people coming into our country that's going to come here to try to destroy our country.
Well, Democrats want that.
Yeah, well, absolutely, because they'll vote Democrat. But we don't want that. We don't want terrorists coming into our country. Am I saying that every single person that is wanting to come to America is a terrorist? No. No. Am I saying that every single person that wants to come to America is a thief? No. Listen, I have good friends that migrated here to America. They are outstanding citizens. They work hard. They pay their taxes. They vote. I mean, they're good people. Are there a lot of good people wanting to come to America? Absolutely. 100%. And these bad actors are hurting a lot of good people that are wanting to come to America, because people like me and people like, there's millions of us, we say, we need to just shut down the border altogether because we got these people coming in and we don't know who's coming in. I mean, there could be terrorists, they could be thieves or murderers, some of these people. And so you have a lot of good people, a lot of men, a lot of husbands, a lot of wives, a lot of mothers that want to come to America so their children can have a better life, so they can raise their children and get them a good education. I mean, so I am for legal. I am for it 100%. And so, but we have to be careful about who we let to come in because of national security. We want to protect our country. That should be that should be probably, I'm going to put it in the top, one or two. Whenever it comes to concerns of the President of the United States, one of his top concerns are to be the safety and well-being of the citizens that live here, that are here legally, the United States of America. That ought to be maybe one. I'm not sure what would be more important than that for the president. And so whenever you're just letting everybody come in, you're saying to the whole world, I don't care about my country. I don't care about our citizens because I'm going to let anybody come in. And so whenever you build that wall and you have these safety precautions in to protect America, it helps us. And so I don't think we just need to build a wall. I think we need to build a wall, but I think we need to maintain the wall. I think we need to have people on the wall to protect the wall.
Right.
I think it's important because of national security concerns.
Right. Well, I'll never forget this. This was back in January. 60 Minutes did an episode about exactly what was happening at the border. There's an opening near Tijuana of our border, and a journalist from 60 Minutes went to this spot, and this was a place where Chinese migrants were being shipped to, and they were coming across this one spot of the border by the hundreds every single day. That's just one of many porous spots of our border. I'll never forget watching this because there was a U.S. Border Patrol agent stationed there with a firearm. He's standing maybe 30 feet away from this opening in our border, and there are migrants streaming through with backpacks and roller bags and all sorts of other luggage, carrying who knows what. And this Border Patrol agent, he's so completely powerless, he can't do anything to stop them. This Border Patrol agent had to stand 30, maybe 40 feet away and just stand there and watch migrants pour in, bringing fentanyl, bringing whatever else. It was utterly insane. So when we talk about immigration, you and I are in favor of legal immigration.
Absolutely.
We are in favor of good people coming here, abiding by legal processes, and doing exactly what you and I do, following the American dream. But when it comes to violating our laws from the moment that they step foot in this country, when it comes to bringing drugs, when it comes to bringing crime, it's absolutely unacceptable. Here's another little bit of it. I don't want to get too historical, but disclaimer, everybody, my academic background isn't history, so I can't help but take it in that direction a little bit. It's very common to make observations between what's happening in America and the fall of the Roman Empire. So the Roman Empire fell towards the end of the 5th century AD. Do you know what the period is called? In which, so the 100 years or so before the collapse of the Western Roman Empire and the several hundred years after. It's called the Migration Era. That's what it's called. So, that has been for decades and decades, the historical term applied to the period during which the Roman Empire fell. Vandals, Visigoths, other kinds of Goths coming in, flooding the Roman Empire, mostly European parts of it, destroying it little by little, generation after generation. So when we talk about something that will absolutely, it's not a could, it is a will. When when we talk about something that will completely rewrite the identity of America, if not absolutely destroy it, that is migration. It is unchecked. You cannot have. So in December, it was around 10,000 migrants per day estimated to be coming in. Now it's about 5,000. 5,000 plus migrants per day coming into this country unchecked. And as you rightfully pointed out, military-age men coming here from parts of the world that do not share anything close to American values, coming from Muslim majority countries or countries that don't share any kind of Western values. I mean, this is going to completely upend the idea of America. This is going to completely destroy this country if we don't get serious about it immediately.
Yeah, I agree. We have to take control now. And it doesn't seem like Joe Biden is going to. It seems like he's just going to continue to let things go the way that they are. And that's why it's so important. That's when states come into play. Like Texas doing all that they can to protect the southern border, and other states coming in and helping. And that's why we have to elect President Trump. We have to reelect him so we can take back control. What's happening. Another big issue would be whenever it comes to the border, sex trafficking. You have these, they call them coyotes, where they're bringing in, these people, and, they're bringing them in across the border, and they bring in these girls. And I've heard so many stories, about how they're bringing in these girls and they're sex trafficking them. I know our Attorney General here in Mississippi, she's been a strong advocate, for fighting against sex trafficking, and she's done a really good job in this area. There was a bus that I read about where it was right here on the coast, and she was involved. Like, it was all night long, and they were rescuing these girls, which was really, really good, that they're taking these girls from these people that are sex trafficking them and that are making money off of these girls. And a lot of times these people are coming in from the border, in some cases. And I mean, that's one reason why we have to do what we can to protect these girls,
Right.
Because it's important, to get these girls, out of these people's hands, to get them, into safety. And so that comes back to protecting the border, whether we're bringing them in to our country to sex traffic or whether or not they're being brought out of our country to sex traffic.
Right.
We need to do all that we can to protect our children. And one way we protect our children is by building that wall, making sure that wall is built and taken care of. And so, but you go back to the Bible, where Nehemiah went in and he built the wall and they finished it, which is very, very important.
Absolutely. Well, you talk about, protecting these young girls who are being smuggled in, they're being trafficked in, they're being sold into sex slavery. I mean, a fact worth noting here is that to date, in the year 2024, the world actually has more slaves than we ever have, by far. So there are a greater number of slaves worldwide, by far, than there ever have been during history. But when it comes to protecting these young girls, protecting the weak and protecting the vulnerable, that is a Christian virtue. That has always been a Christian virtue. So going back to what we were talking about a few minutes ago, about why we're put on this earth, what responsibilities there are of us, protecting the weak, protecting the vulnerable, not only within our families, but within society as a whole. Doing what we can, exerting ourselves, putting ourselves out there, not being wimps, not being wussies, not cowering away from the world, but being confrontational against evil, protecting the weak, protecting the vulnerable. That's why we're here.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. Someone asked, well, what can I do? What can I do? I don't have a big name. I don't have a big following. I don't have a lot of money. I mean, what can I do? Well, let's think about Nehemiah for a second. Nehemiah was a cupbearer for the king, but he had a determination about him to get something done for the greater good. I mean, Nehemiah, he had determination that he heard about the problem. He said, here's what the problem is. The problem is our walls have been destroyed. Our city has been destroyed. And Nehemiah was determined that he was going to make a difference. And he did. He didn't have the big name. He didn't have the huge following. But Nehemiah, he made a difference. And so every single person that is watching this show today, let me just encourage you a little bit. Let me just say to you, you can make a difference. You can make an impact on the greatest country, in my opinion, in the world. How do you start? Start right at home. Start right at home. Every mother that's watching, every father that's watching, every single young person that's watching, you can, if you just are determined, like Nehemiah was, in the world that he was living in, he was determined to make a difference. And if you'll just determined that I'm going to make a difference. I'm going to study hard. I'm going to learn. I'm going to work hard. And I'm going to do all that I can to make a difference in my country. If all of us would do that, there are a lot of Christians in America. And if all of us would do that, you talk about making a difference in our country.
Right.
You talk about making a huge difference. Whenever it comes to Christians just standing and saying, I'm going to make a difference. Nehemiah was determined. I'm telling you something else Nehemiah had. He had faith. He had faith. He had faith in his God, that his God was going to take care of him, that his God was going to see to it that the job that he set out to do, that he was going to be able to finish. And so it's so important for Christians. It's so important that we are determined, but it's important that we have faith, I'm going to tell you something else that's important. It's important that we believe in what we're doing. So many times it'll get hard. Sometimes life gets difficult. I mean, sometimes there could be a lot of pressure. Sometimes, the emails and sometimes the phone calls and sometimes friends turning their back on you, it can take a toll on you. But that's where that determination, that's where that faith comes into play. That is where that I believe in what I'm trying to do.
Even Christ was betrayed.
Absolutely. By one of his own. And so, do I believe in this? Why are we doing God and Country? Why are we doing all that we're doing? Because we believe in we believe in the message. I believe in what I'm saying. Listen, I believe with all my heart that we need to build a wall. I believe with all my heart that we need to stand strong in our homes and stand strong in our churches. I believe that. And because of that, we're going to stand and we're going to fight, just as Nehemiah did. Are we going to win every battle? No. This last election cycle, last year, there were several candidates that I was trying to help and work with, and several of them lost.
It's a crusade. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose.
But there were several that we won. And I think about, these that we won and how we did take a step in the right direction. We didn't win every race that we was involved in, but we won several. And so it's part of that. We can't give up. We can't quit. We can't throw in the towel. We can't say, I've had enough. We can't just say, well, it's too hard. No, the next generation, my children are counting on us. Their children are counting on us to continue and to fight for what we believe in.
Right. Well, you talked about how so much of it begins with the family. That's true, I think, but even on an even more microscopic level, right? We talked last week about how there's the federal government, state government, local government, but the most local form of government of all is the family.
Right.
On an even more microscopic level, there's the individual, right? So it begins with the individual. All action is individual action, right? But when it comes to the individual, I think that step number one is pray. Pray extensively. I think that we were talking about Psalms and Proverbs last week. There are a lot of recurring themes about wisdom and about how the Holy Spirit will give wisdom out to anyone who calls for it. God is generous with wisdom that he gives out, and there's no way that you can embody wisdom and allow 5,000 to 10,000 migrants a day to come pouring over your border.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that we're to pray for every day. As you think about a father, I need wisdom. Think about a husband, I need wisdom. Think about this show. We need wisdom. Just think about the direction and things that we're standing for, and how can we get our message out, and how can we accomplish all that we want to accomplish. It's going to take wisdom. It's going to take wisdom from on high, getting with God and asking God for wisdom. In Nehemiah 4, whenever he talks about building that wall, he had opposition. I mean, not everyone was for building the wall. I mean, there was Sanballat and Tobiah, and those men were doing all that they could to get Nehemiah to come up the wall and to have they had a little town that was called Ono. And so Sanballat and Tobiah was like, come meet us down here and let's have a meeting of the minds. And they meant harm. That's what they meant harm. They meant to do Nehemiah harm. And Nehemiah said this. He said, I cannot come off the wall because I have a job to do. And I'm paraphrasing. But that's what Nehemiah was basically saying. I have a work to do. I can't come off the wall. I can't take a break. I can't come down and visit. They meant harm anyway. But that goes back to the determination of Nehemiah.
Right, diligence.
That goes back to a mind to work. Was it always going to be easy? No. Was it going to be hard? Was it going to be difficult? Yes. But he had a mind to work. He was a man who said, it doesn't matter what comes my way. It doesn't matter the obstacle. It doesn't matter what happens. We're going to continue to work. Nehemiah had a plan. He had a plan. You read Nehemiah, you talk about as they're building the wall. At one point, because of Sanballat and Tobiah, whenever they were building the wall, they would have a trowel in one hand and they would have a spear in the other hand. They would be these 10 men, okay, you're working on this wall while these 10 men are protecting you, while these 10 men are looking out for you. And so they had a plan. And it's important that you and I, we have a plan. Think about all these elections, that are going to be coming up here soon for city council, for supervisor, for mayor. Sheriff, House rep and state senate. All these races are coming up. It's 2024. And hey, if you're planning on running for office, you need to put your plan together now. You need to begin to network now in your county. You need to begin to network now in your city, developing a strategic plan like Nehemiah did. How was Nehemiah able to finish the wall? Because he had a mind to work. He was diligent. He put his plan in action. I got a friend of mine that says this all the time. He says that action and prayer are brothers. They're brothers. And I like what my dad has said, and I've repeated it many, many times. We must work like it depends upon us, and we must pray like it depends upon him.
You were talking several minutes ago about how much of a difference could we make if all of us, if all Christians got up, and we confronted the evil in the world, we engaged the evil in the world, whether it's the Biden administration, whether it's some other evil influence in our government, federal government, state government, local government, whichever. Samuel Adams, the great Samuel Adams, had something pretty remarkable to say on this topic. He said, "It does not take a majority to prevail, but an irate, tireless minority keen on setting brush fires in the minds of men." So, that tells me that it beckons me to ask the question, what if only half of us? What if only a quarter of us? What if only eight of us Christians? What if an even smaller fraction of us got out there, engaged the world, confronted evil? I think that it wouldn't take all that many of us to really take this country and turn it around if we got focused.
As a perfect illustration, talk about Gideon. Gideon in the Bible, he started out with like 30,000. But before he went to battle, he had 300.
Wow.
God took it from thousands. He said, I don't need all the thousands. I just need one man that's willing to stand up and say, here's the direction we're going. I'm determined to lead these men. And Gideon, even in the beginning, Gideon didn't even want to, right? Gideon was like, no, I can't do this. But God was insistent upon using Gideon. And then Gideon had all these thousands that God's like, no, that's too many, and brought it all the way down to 300. So yes, your point is absolutely 100% correct. It doesn't take a majority necessarily.
Right.
It takes a few. It takes a few. And so and it goes back to, go back to Gideon and talk about Gideon, to where it started with thousands, it went down to 300. And then God said, here's what I want you to do. You're not going to use your sword. You're going to take a lamp, and you're going to put a pitcher over that lamp. And when I tell you to, you're going to break the pitcher. And then you're going to shine this light. And Gideon, he didn't use all the men that he had. He sent most of them home. And then he had an unusual game plan for the war. Okay, God, you want me to send home 29,700 men. You want me to fight with only 300 men. And then you want me to take a lamp with a pitcher and put the pitcher over the lamp. And then you want me to break the pitcher, and that's going to give us victory? And God's like, yeah, that's exactly right. That's what I want you to do. And so that's what Gideon did. He sent home 29,700, gave all the 300 men a lamp, gave them a pitcher. They went out there and they won the battle. Because it goes back to that determination. It goes back to that faith in God, that yes, we might have a few, but we're going to stand for what we believe in. And we're going to continue to push. And we're going to say no to this woke agenda. We're going to say no to this left that's trying to destroy our country. And we're going to stand for life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. You go back to the American Revolution. We was not in the majority. They had more weapons than we did. They had more money than we did. Our military was broke, but they had everything that you could possibly have and to win a battle. But yet we had some men, our founding fathers, that said, not on our watch. We're going to be determined, and we're going to fight, and we're going to have faith in God. And that's what they did, and they won. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to be determined. I want you to push back. I want you to stand. I want you to have faith in God that He is going to 100% bring victory in this present day. Reed, thank you for joining us today.
Thank you, Dan.
I've enjoyed our time together. I've enjoyed this show. And I hope that we've encouraged somebody out there today. If you haven't already shared the show, if you haven't already copied and pasted the link, I would encourage you to do so. We're across all the social media platforms, correct? YouTube, Twitter.
All of them.
All of them. And so if you're watching this on Twitter or X, if you're watching this on Facebook or Instagram, or if you're watching this on YouTube or Rumble, share it. Help us get out. If you're watching this on Lindell TV, share. If you're watching this on the Midnight Right, share it. Share it with everybody. If you're watching this on the website, share it. And to help us get out our message. Thank you and God bless. Reed, thanks for joining us, and I pray that you have a great week.
Thanks, you too.
Y'all have a good evening.
Hey guys, it's Reed here. I don't say this about a lot of people, but I have to say Mike Lindell is a real patriot, and we could not be more thankful to him and MyPillow for sponsoring today's episode of God and Country. Remember, go to MyPillow.com and save huge on a great night of sleep by entering the promo code Midnight Ride. Thanks.